Thank you, everyone, for joining me on another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid. I'd like to thank everybody. We always open up in the name of God, and we like to thank. We have a very special guest coming on. So everybody, I've been wanting to talk to this guy and pick his brains for at least 2 years now, and I've been blessed to be in his presence. So I want to bring in the former Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, how are you doing today, sir?
Well, fine, Rashid. I hope you are.
I'm doing blessed. I cannot complain. And if I did, no one really wants to hear it. Mr. Roberts, I've been wanting to pick your brain for at least 2 or 3 years now. I want to ask you, before we talk about Russia, before we talk about China, where are the adults in the room in Washington? It seems like the deep state is afraid of Trump. It seems like Biden is a walking imbecile. It seems like the Democratic Party is absolutely insane. It seems like where are the adults? Are there any adults?
Not really, and everybody in Washington is in the pocket of some vested interest. They're either in Israel's pocket, or they're in the military security complex's pocket, or they're in big pharma's pocket, or they're in agribusiness pocket. They're in a pocket. And so they don't really represent us. They represent the people in whose pockets they are. And those are the people who finance their political campaigns. So you can't get them to respond to the people's interest or to the country's interest, because they spend all their time responding to the interests of Israel, the military security complex, big pharma, agribusiness, whatever power group that finances their political campaigns. So that's the real trouble. We can't do anything about it, Rashid, unless we could somehow get money out of politics, so that economically powerful interest groups could not buy the government. But that's what happens. The government simply gets bought by the people who finance the political campaigns, and so it doesn't serve anybody else.
Well, Mr. Roberts, it seems like to me the military-industrial complex, the elite, and everybody else puts everybody interest above the average person. They are destroying the educational system, and we know that the educational system is what civilizes people. And without proper education, all we have to do is look at the suburbs, look at the inner city, and we see savagery spread everywhere. Violence, no rule of law, the collapse of morals and ethics and stuff. They have no money for the educational system, but they can always find money for Ukraine. How is it that these people spit in the face of the average person on the street by doing that and still remain in power?
Well, Rashid, they're in power because the people vote for them. It's the name recognition from all the political advertising. Now, you have to count among the powerful groups the education lobby. So a lot of money goes into education. The problem is not the absence of money in education, but the fact that the woke people have taken it over. It's now no longer education, it's indoctrination. For example, as you surely are aware, they teach little kids they might be born into the wrong body. They teach the white kids that they're racist. So education is no longer a learning process. It's an indoctrination process. And so that's what makes the students dumb. They don't learn math. Math is now it's called white racism. Math is a tool of white racists. Well, if you believe that, you're not going to teach math, or you're not going to learn it. So you can't learn about the Western civilization because it's said to be racist, exploitative. So they don't learn anything about their heritage. They don't know the history. They don't know the literature. They haven't learned any of the lessons that come from great works. So that's how they get dumb. Um, and of course, now that they have the education system, it can only get worse. So how do you get it back? There have been parents that go to school board meetings and they complain about uh, transgenderism and the other rot that they teach the kids, and they get thrown out of the school board meetings. So we have a situation in which public authorities at no level, not local, not state, not federal, are paying any attention to the people. They may pretend they do. If they want to use some group at some particular time, then they'll go speak to that group, all happy talk and everything, but they're just using them. So that's the real situation as far as I can see it. And Rashid, I've noticed that it's gotten a lot worse in the last 40 years. When I was in the government, there were still people who had some concept of America, some concept of serving the public. And even though they had to pay a lot of attention to the material interests that financed them, they still had room to worry about the country and are we actually doing the right thing. And so it sort of held the country together. But in the last 40 years, it just seems the interest groups have taken completely over. And Congress respond, and the president as well, to the interest groups. And that simply excludes the rest of us.
It seems like America is going down, down, down. Um, and you can see it in the political climate of America. And they've come up with some more charges against Trump. What is it about Trump that that has the other side so fearful of him?
Well, Rashid, two things. If you remember, during his campaign in 2016, he said he was going to normalize relations with Russia. Now, let's look at what that told the military security complex. It told the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, it told all the armaments manufacturers, the airplane manufacturers, the shipyards, that he was going to get rid of their enemy. If you normalize relations with Russia, it means the enemy is gone. Well, if the enemy is gone, what happens to the military security complex's budget and its power? They're gone. So who was the first person to attack Trump? It was the head of the CIA. And this is how the Russiagate started, because he said, I'm going to normalize relations with Russia. Well, of course, the United States government's been trying to do that ever since John F. Kennedy, and had succeeded. Reagan finally succeeded because the danger of nuclear war, this is a supreme danger. There's just really no surviving it, especially today when the weapons are so powerful. So this was a threat to the establishment, and so they turned on him. And what he also did at his inauguration speech, he said he was going to take the power away from the elite and give it back to the people. Well, the elite were all sitting there listening to him, and you could see them laughing and smiling like, who does he think he is? He's going to take the power away from us, and we'll teach him a lesson. And they did. He had 4 years of every kind of fake charge under the world, under the sun. And he's had another 4 years of turning these fake charges into fake indictments that they can't sustain in court. So that's the problem with Trump. He says, I represent the people. And who does he really represent? He represents the remnants of the American working class. That's who he represents. If you look at all of these Trump Republicans who wear these MAGA hats, you're talking about the working class. Now, the working class used to be represented by the Democratic Party, and the Republicans represented business. And so you had countervailing power. One party looked after the workers' interests, one party looked after the business interests, and they had to make compromises along the way, and things worked. And neither side could go too far at the expense of the other. Well, but now the Democrats don't represent the working class. In fact, we hardly have one, because the Wall Street forced the manufacturing firms to move all the jobs to China and other parts of Asia. And so this wiped out the manufacturing in the United States. You know, most of the stuff that has an American brand name on it comes in from China, because the American firms relocated their production there. China, Vietnam, Indonesia. These are the places where the American jobs were shipped off to. So this kind of destroyed the power of unions. The great manufacturing unions are simply gone. The great northern industrial states are close to bankruptcy. I mean, look at Detroit. It's almost a wasteland. So the big cities have declining populations, the big industrial manufacturing cities. So a terrible thing has happened. And so this has destroyed balance, because what are the unions now? They're public sector unions, like teachers' unions. They're already highly paid. The blue collar workforce has had a knockout blow, and so this has reduced their power. The Democrats lost interest in them because they didn't have the money to support their political campaigns, and so this is how the system got out of balance, and it's very much out of balance now.
Before we transition to the Israeli crisis, the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, I want to go back to something, because you were in government, and I was always taught that the president has the prerogative to classify or declassify information. And so when they brought up the charges on Trump having these classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate, and they beat him down, and I'm apolitical, but they beat him down in the press. They didn't speak about when Biden was vice president and he had classified information, and the vice president does not have the prerogative to classify or declassify. Why is that? I mean, why did anybody say that? Why did they allow that narrative that the president was in the wrong for having classified documents in his estate, but the former vice president was okay for having classified documents in his garage?
Well, because the establishment was after Trump, not Biden. Biden was doing what they wanted. Biden wasn't threatening the establishment. It's Trump that threatened the establishment. He said, I'm going to take away your enemy. I'm going to take away the power and give it back to people. So this is why they went after Trump. You know, we don't really have a media. We have a propaganda ministry. If you look at the so-called media, look how they treat Trump in the campaign. It's 90% of it is against Trump. Then go look at Camilla. 90% is for. You see, we haven't had a media since the last few years of the Clinton administration, the last few years of the 20th century, when the Clinton administration allowed 6 mega companies to purchase 90% of the American media. So what had been thousands of independent newspapers, radio stations, TV stations. All of this was concentrated in 6 hands, and it's easily controlled. And it so happens that Trump's appearance created a situation for the Republicans where they are opposed to the ruling elites, whereas the Democrats are positioned to be for the ruling elites. Well, that's where the power is, and that's the reason they ignore charges that they bring against Trump that they could easily bring against Biden. They're not out to get Biden. It's that simple. Or Camilla. They're out to get people who don't follow the official narratives. We can see that, for example, look at Elon Musk. He bought Twitter and turned it back into a free speech social media. Well, everyone's trying to close him down. The Europeans are trying to close him down. The Brazilian government's trying to close him down. He's being harassed by Washington. Now, if he simply said, okay, I'll censor everybody, just like the previous owners, they'd leave him alone. He'd get very rich and nobody would be bothering him. But you see, when you allow freedom of speech, you allow somebody to challenge the official narrative. They don't want the narrative challenged. They don't want to hear, for example, that Osama bin Laden isn't responsible for 9/11. They don't want to hear that the COVID vaccine was far more deadly than COVID. They don't want to hear these things. And the people who say these things or let them be said on social media, that they get in trouble. And that, I think, Rashid, is the answer to the question that you asked.
Aren't these endemic signs of a society that is unraveling and collapsing at breakneck speed? And it seems to me that America is on the brinks of total collapse, economically, politically, culturally, and everything. And it seems like the people in office, they are speeding up the collapse with. See, what I'm trying to say to you is the policies that they're putting in place, it seems like it's speeding up the collapse. Because if you're in debt and you continue to go in debt, why would you antagonize people that are buying your debt? Why would you sanction 1/3 of the world's population and then scream about the dollar is being destroyed or your dollar is being uprooted? I mean, it seems like there's no accountability, and we see it because it's pervasive all across society. There's no accountability across the board with the citizens. There's no accountability with government, and it seems like to me these are some of the greatest ingredients to the recipe of American collapse.
Well, I agree with you. I think you described it accurately. That's exactly the case. And you, no doubt, want to know why isn't something done about it? Well, there's nobody that can do anything about it. Trump says he will. I'm not sure he'd be able to because it'd be very hard for him to form a government that will support him. There's certainly nobody in Washington. Look what happened when he was in office. He didn't know who to appoint. He appointed all of his enemies. Well, suppose he knows who to appoint now. I doubt it myself, but suppose he knows. How will he get them confirmed in office? You know, cabinet secretaries have to be confirmed by the Senate. At the moment, the Democrats control the Senate. Why are they going to confirm somebody who's going to help Trump? They're not. So I think you'd have a hard time forming a government. Moreover, I don't think he's going to be allowed to win. They've already set up all the mechanisms in the swing states that they used to steal the 2020 election, the 2022 election. They now have legalized them. So drop boxes are now legal. You don't have to authenticate or certify the votes. They've made in Detroit, or in Wayne County, which has Detroit, Dearborn, and another big city, 98% of the poll watchers appointed are Democrats. So all the mechanisms are in place for them to steal the election, and that's what they're going to do. You can see how it's unfolding in the press. If you remember back in July last month, the news was that Camilla is just totally unpopular. She has no support. Nobody wants her. Now, what is the news? She's leading. She's the leading candidate. She's ahead of Trump. She's such a powerful candidate, such an attractive candidate. This is all being orchestrated for the public's benefit so they can steal the election. You can't steal the election for a person who's low in the polls. So you create all these fake polls to make it look like she's winning anyhow. So of course they didn't steal the election. Look, the polls, she was winning. Well, you know how they get these polls? They don't poll Republicans, or they don't have the right weight of Republicans in the polls. So they're mainly polling Democrats. So that's how they get Camilla in the lead. But the people don't know this. They just hear a snippet on the news. Camilla leads Trump by 4 or 5 points. So if they hear that from now until November, they'll simply assume Camilla won. She might get 40% of the vote. I doubt it, but she might. But since everybody expects that she's going to win because that's what they've heard from the media all these months, they won't realize it's been stolen. And some of these Democrat jurisdictions have now made it illegal, as I understand it. It's now illegal to challenge the vote count. So even if you have evidence that fraud has happened, if you bring it forward, you have committed a felony and they arrest you. So you can see how far gone the system is, Rashid. I mean, you're completely correct to see that and say that. And I'm just giving illustrations that back you up. That's all I'm doing. I think you've diagnosed it correctly.
And so when we look at the system, like you were just talking about the Trump and the Kamala situation, do you believe that if Trump loses, there'll be civil war or civil insurrection?
No, I think the American people are worn out, exhausted, and they'll accept anything.
Wow.
Look, they accepted all the lies about COVID, the vaccine. Remember, the vaccine is safe and protective. It's killed more people than COVID. They accept all the lies about 9/11. Remember the lies about how they captured bin Laden and buried him at sea. And we have all the lies about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, and all the lies about Assad's use of chemical weapons, all the lies about Ukraine, all the lies about Iran. Look, we've accepted the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. Most Americans are in favor of it. They'll accept anything. I just don't think there's any fight. I don't think there's any fight in the people. Look, how long have we had open borders? Years now. This doesn't benefit any American citizen. No American citizen benefits from having your country overrun. I mean, why do we worry about national defense when we let in 3.6 million immigrant invaders every year? What is the point of worrying about national defense? I mean, so I just don't think there'll be any kind of protest. Look what happened to Trump and his lawyers who protested the theft of the 2020 election. They had a lot of evidence. I mean, the evidence was strong. Well, Trump was indicted for interfering with the election because he challenged the vote count. Well, if the president of the United States, and this happened to him while he was still in office, so if the president of the United States can't raise a question about the vote count, how can anybody?
And I was suspended off these platforms multiple times for bringing up the challenge to the elections or whatever. They suspended me. They even one time deleted my channel because I brought up. I said, "How in the world can you question the legitimacy of Venezuela's election or question the legitimacy of Putin's election in Russia or the other lead? But in the so-called land of the free, you have no right to question the legitimacy of the elections at home." And they threw me off of YouTube for a while. And I was even suspended. I was doing the show live, Mr. Roberts. This is the truth. You can go back and look at it. And YouTube suspended me live on the air while I was streaming. So yeah, the censorship is out of control. But I want to ask you about Israel and the genocide and the slaughter in Gaza, in the United States already being in a hole economically. Why is she deploying massive amounts of weapons and warships to defend Israel when it's not in her interest economically, politically, or militarily? These are more these will be more fissures in the cracks of the dam of American empire if she continues to antagonize people that buy her debt. Are they thinking? That's what I want to know. Are the leadership, the leaders of America and the West thinking, because we're in a tailspin economically?
Well, Rashid, probably the most powerful interest group that influences our government is the Israel lobby. They have, over many decades, positioned Israel as the oppressed, the underdog, the Holocaust. Everyone wants to get them. Everybody's an anti-Semite. They have infiltrated the Christian evangelical churches, many of whom seem to worship Israel rather than Jesus. and really, they're called Christian Zionists. And in fact, I think the largest evangelical church is the one run by that fellow named Hagee.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically worship Israel. Now, and then also you have to keep in mind that every year the American taxpayers give several $1 billion to the Israeli government. Now that money comes right back and buys our elections.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get elected by opposing Israel. If you take if you criticize any Israeli policy, you won't be elected. If you're in office and you start criticizing it, you'll lose the next election. There are no successful cases of senators or members of the House taking issue with an Israeli policy and surviving. It can't be done. And nobody even tries. Look, it was just recently, wasn't it, that Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, was invited by both parties to come address Congress. And he got, 53 standing ovations. Now, this is a guy that's slaughtering Palestine, killing everybody in Gaza, pushing them down. The plan apparently is to push them out into the Egyptian desert. And they've now started on the remnants of the West Bank, and they're forcing them out of the West Bank into Jordan. And so here we have a massive, horrendous slaughter of people, theft of their country and of their lives. And the guy responsible gets 53 standing ovations from Congress. So this shows you the strength of the power of Israel over the United States. So you can't expect any thing along that line to change. Now, you raised the question of all the warships and jet fighters and troops that we have allocated in the area of Israel. It's not there to protect Israel. It's there to attack Iran, assuming, and Israel has been pushing us to do that for many years, assuming that we can cause Iran to do something that justifies us attacking them. And that's why the two carrier task forces are there. That's why I think the division of American paratroopers are still there. So many jet fighters have been located there. So that's all in preparation for attacking Iran, assuming we can get that in the works, get Iran to do something that gives us an excuse. So it'll be a great increase in war there. I think also the war in Ukraine is going to explode because we are now giving the Ukrainians permission to use our long-range missiles to attack deep inside Russia. Well, the Russians are not going to tolerate that. So, and moreover, the Iranians can't operate the weapons. They're operated by American officers. So you see, we've got two big wars that could explode, even at the same time. One in the Middle East, one in Europe. So, and you rightly raised the question: how can a government get itself in such a mess as we have? And it's that the various interest groups that control the government have got us in that mess. That's what's happened. The Israelis have got us in that mess. The FBI, the CIA, the armaments industries, they've got us in that mess, you see. So that's the mess we're in, and there's no way out of it. If you take a position against the wars, if you're in the Senate or the House, then you lose the campaign contributions from the armaments companies. You see, they would go to your opponent. If you take a position against Israel, you'll lose those contributions. They'll go to your opponent. And so people are basically unable to function. They can't do anything except appease the people who finance their campaigns and keep them in power. And that's the problem.
I remember former two-time Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. She told me that you have to take an oath to Israel when you're in Congress now. Which blew my mind. And she and I were holding this conversation. She and I go way back. But I wanted to come back to a point about the deployment of the troops and the ships and the crisis with Iran, Israel, and the United States. Now, they want to attack Iran, and Israel has been pushing them to do that for years. But has any strategic thinker called in any of the finance people in Washington, and say, listen, this is our economic situation right here, to initiate a war or to be involved in a war in the Middle East against Iran would cripple the American economy if Iran shuts off the Strait of Hormuz and if one or two of those carrier groups are hit or sunk. I mean, do they, because they have money and they have all of these think tanks, do they analyze that, Mr. Roberts?
Well, some of them might realize that. They may be aware of that, Rashid, but they can't say that because then guess who finances the think tanks? The military security complex, Israel. So if you start talking against what the military security complex in Israel want, there goes your financing. Your think tank hadn't got any more money to pay the thinkers. So that's a simple explanation. You have to understand these think tanks are financed by people whose interests are served by the reports that come out of the think tanks. So, and most of them are financed by armaments companies, and the big military airplane companies. So you got Lockheed Martin and you got Boeing. You see, these are sources of finance for foreign affairs think tanks. And so, for the most part, they're going on about our enemies and what we have to do about our enemies. And we need more military spending. We have to beef up the defenses. Like, recently they got, I think, Biden to commit $1 trillion to upgrading our nuclear weapons. Well, we already got enough nuclear weapons to blow the world up 3 or 4 times, but we're going to spend $1 trillion getting more. So this is the way it works, Rashid. You can't expect any kind of rational decision to be made because the interest groups have their own agendas, and it forces the members in the government to support those agendas. Otherwise, they're cut off without money. And this is the situation. You got to remember that Supreme Court case. It wasn't that long ago that basically said the corporations have the right to buy the government. And they have. That's what they've done.
I see from our conversation that these people are not long-term strategic thinkers due to the fact that, yeah, you may have some short-term gains, but at what cost? You lose your economy, you lose your military might, you lose your political clout for these short-term gains. And it seems like right now they are pushing everything to explode to the explosion point in the Middle East. I was talking to a few one of my friends, and they were telling me about how Russia is arming Iran to the teeth, how China is arming Iran to the teeth, because Iran stands as a bulwark against them in the underbelly of Russia and China. Why would America take on this task when she has been beaten? We're on the 4th NATO military that has been crushed by Russia in Ukraine. They destroyed the Ukrainian army 3 times, and they're on the 4th time. And they are destroying U.S. weaponry, Western weaponry, and yet America feels the need to fight a 2-war front and even push towards antagonizing China. Where is the strategic thinking, and where is the sanity in the policies of the U.S. and the Western leaders?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to see any strategic thinking or any sanity. But again, Rashid, I'll tell you, it's the same answer. You can't, if you're a member of the House or Senate or even the president, and you start thinking and acting strategically, then you're not following the interests of the military security complex. You're not following the interests of Israel. And so that prevents you from being a strategic thinker, because when you get out of step, you're finished. Mm-hmm. See, that's look, Trump was finished, wasn't he? His whole term, he was in trouble. Remember, Russiagate, there were 2 impeachments. There was Strippergate, Documents Gate, January 6th, insurrection. Well, how can he function as a president? And that's because he was out of step with the powers that be. And so there may be people in the House and Senate who can think strategically. They probably agree with you. They wouldn't say so publicly. They may say, well, Rashid, you're right, but I can't do anything about it. If I open my mouth, I'm finished. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem, Rashid. And there aren't any. I mean, look, where's the peace movement? Where is it? Because there's no money for a peace movement, is there? Even organizations that were originally created to encourage peace, they're now for war. Because that's where the money is. And so this is the trouble, there are isolated voices, and there's yours, there's mine, there's the military people like McGregor, Colonel McGregor. There's the one that they yanked off the plane the other day, the UN arms inspector.
Scott Ritter.
What's his name?
Scott Ritter.
Yeah, Scott Ritter. I just went out of my head. And Tulsi Gabbard. They harassed her in the airports. She was actually a Democratic representative. And she actually didn't. I think she was a candidate for the Democratic nomination in 2020.
Yes, she was.
See, she's now harassed. She's on these lists, and it gets searched and searched and searched and harassed. And so there's just no countervailing power. There's no other voice. The media has one voice, the print and TV media. I mean, if it's the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, they all have the same story. It's almost like the exact same words.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no alternative voice in the media. It's just in the alternative media. And it's fragmented, and a lot of them are having difficulties. And plus, the powers that be create alternative media sites that give their line. So unless a person's sophisticated, he can end up in a site online that he thinks alternative media, and it's financed by Israel or the State Department or the CIA. So, how do you get information to the public? And what good does it do for the public to know when their own representatives don't dare represent them? So what I'm proving is how correct you are that we're rapidly going down the drain, and because we can't do anything about it. What can we do about it? And they're going to look. I don't think anybody wants Camilla, not a majority, want Camilla as president, or this guy she's picked as vice president. But the elite are going to arrange that. That's what's going to happen. And because they go along with the elite. Trump doesn't. He's a threat. Look, just what has become of the investigation of the assassination attempt on Trump? It's disappeared. There's no sign of it. I don't think the Republicans or the conservatives want it investigated any more than the liberals and the Democrats. Why? Because if the truth comes out that this was an attack on Trump by the United States government, Oh, it hurts the reputation of our country. It'll cause people to lose faith in the government. Well, if you are rah, rah, rah America or USA, 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 America, you look at something hurting America's reputation as some kind of commie thing. You see what I'm saying? So there's no real pressure to have this attempted assassination investigated.
Mhm. I think also what has them scared of Trump is that he's not a politician in the sense of politicians that they're accustomed to. I think he's unorthodox, and I think that is one thing that scares them a lot because almost all the politicians they had a deep hold on them, and I think that he does things unorthodox, which really scares them at times.
Yeah, it scares them enough that they tried to kill him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they may succeed, but I think they've given up that plan because they realize they can steal the election, and that'll get rid of him, and it'll discourage his supporters because they'll think that, well, the people really won't support doing anything about restoring the country, so it's hopeless. See, I think that's probably what the plan is now, to steal the election, and that proves to all the Trump supporters that it's hopeless. Not even the American people will elect the guy who wants to give them back the power. So everybody will give up, and then the rate of collapse will just accelerate. So as you can see, I'm even more pessimistic than you are.
Do you think that we're going to war in the Middle East?
I think that's the plan. That's the intent. Whether it happens, I don't know. I've made the point over and over, it's very easy for Russia and China and Iran to stop it. All they have to do is have a joint press conference and announce they've just signed a mutual defense treaty. And then Israel and the United States have to think, well, if we attack Iran, what the hell? We've gone to war with Russia and China.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, Israel will instantly disappear. I mean, it's a tiny little place. One Russian missile would wipe Israel off the face of the earth forever. I mean, it wouldn't be a single Israeli left alive. There wouldn't be anything in Israel. I mean, just one Russian missile can blow up a far larger area than Israel. And it would be the end of them, and it would be the end of all. It would be the end of all our bases in the Middle East and Asia and Europe, and most likely the end of us here. So that would be the way to stop it. I mean, but they don't do it. They don't act.
Mr. Robert, I have that same thought about, about the situation in Ukraine. I think some of the things that are happening is brought upon through Russia's inaction on the provocations. And sometimes the way to prevent the escalation is to hit the bully in the mouth, to show the bully, listen, there's a price to be paid for constantly provoking me. But it seems like they're hesitant to do it. But I did read in the article the other day that Vladimir Putin says the time for patience is over.
I know he said so much, but never does anything. So I don't know. I don't think the Western pays any attention to him any longer because, he's had all these red lines and all these warnings, but nothing ever happens. And I think that actually Russia and China are sitting on Iran and stopping them from doing anything. And, Iran was going to teach Israel a lesson for all the assassinations in Tehran, but they haven't done anything. So I agree with you. By failing to respond to provocations, you encourage more, and they get worse, and they'll continue to get worse until finally the thing blows up.
Mhm.
And I've always thought, Rashid, that Putin made a fundamental strategic error when he limited his intervention in Donbass,
Yes, me too.
uh, because that meant the war was going to drag on and on and on and give Washington and NATO forever to get more and more involved.
Hmm.
And they have. They've gotten more and more and more involved. And they're really now it's a war between NATO and Russia.
Hmm.
Uh, this invasion of Kerch, which is actual Mother Russia territory, is outside the war area in Donbass. This was an American operation based on American satellite intelligence. The weapons are operated by American officers. They're Polish troops, French troops. This is a U.S. NATO operation. It has no military value. It's pointless from a military standpoint, but it's a way of sticking their thumb in Putin's eye.
Hmm.
Well, Putin brought that on himself.
Hmm.
He's let this war, we're now into the third year of a war he should have won in 3 weeks. But he said, no, it's not an invasion. We're only concerned with Donbass. We're only going to get the Ukrainians out of the Russian areas. And that's our goal. And so they've never attacked Ukraine in the way that you do to stop a country from being able to conduct war.
Hmm.
He's left the Ukrainian government there to conduct war against him. And the first thing you do is you knock out the government, you know. And so I think we're the cause of it all because Russia is in the way of our hegemony, of our unilateralism. So we want to break Russia up into a bunch of small countries. That's the goal. And the reason they want to get rid of Iran is Iran finances the Hezbollah militia in Lebanon. And that's the militia that's twice repulsed the Israeli invasions of Lebanon. So Israel's afraid to take them on and figures if they can get us to knock out Iran, then Hezbollah won't have any more weapons or money. And then Israel can go and take Lebanon. So those are the main reasons for this trouble. It's coming from Israel and from us. It's not coming from Iran and Russia. But Iran and Russia make it worse by not seizing the issue and being proactive.
Hmm.
In fact, they're hardly even reactive.
I say a lot of that stuff on my show when I'm doing it, and I say that since NATO openly advocates and openly states that they're going to be supplying weapons, I think Russia should openly advocate that we're going to now put into place an interdiction against any weapons or troops coming into Ukraine. We're going to strike them outside of Ukraine's border to prevent the death of Russian personnel in Ukraine. I think that is the best way to show NATO that you're not playing. I'm not, and people say, well, you're advocating war. No, I'm advocating this. This prevents war because if you let it fester over and over again, there will be a miscalculation and then war is just full blown then. What say you on this matter, Mr.
Yeah.
Roberts?
Well, people used to think that way. You might remember this was the complaints against the Prime Minister Chamberlain in the British government in the 30s. They said, look, you're not standing up to the Germans. You're not standing up to the Nazis. You keep giving in. You gave in on Czechoslovakia. And so this encourages them to demand more and be more aggressive. That's the way people used to think, but they apparently don't think that way anymore. But I agree with you. This is the difficulty. But again, the main cause of that is that Putin didn't realize he had to win this war real quick before the West could get involved. And he didn't. And this has then opened up that whole mare's nest, that whole can of worms. There's so much involvement now of the West in the war that, to be truthful, we are already at war with Russia.
Do you think that because America believes that if war takes place in Europe, that she will be spared? Do you believe this is one of the main reasons why the provocations continue?
I don't know. I don't know if they're that stupid. I think
I heard one of the officials say that.
Well, they may. A lot of people say things they don't believe because they're trying to either not answer the real questions, or they're trying to form a narrative. I think that the reason the provocations continue is that they've never imposed a cost on the United States.
Yes, sir.
It's like you said, we haven't had to pay a price for all the provocations. And so they continue. So I think they just simply think Russia is not going to do anything. And I think what they're hoping is that Putin's caution will end up discrediting him among the Russian nationalists, and he'll be replaced. And then I think they're hoping they can continue breaking up Russia. They broke up when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. We seized it and we started breaking it up. You see, Ukraine was part of Russia. So we took it out and created another country. Belarus was part of Russia. We took it out and created another country. The Baltic states were de facto part of Russia. Now we got 3 more countries. And then in Soviet Central Asia, there was Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Armenia. You see, all those were Russian republics, Soviet republics. Well, we made independent countries. So Russia today is still a giant country, but it used to be this big, and now it's that big. Because we broke off this end, we broke off this end. And we broke off Georgia, which is Sochi is the capital. It's on the Black Sea. We broke that off. Well, our hope is to continue to break it up. And they have this Muslim area. So we've tried to radicalize them, and we succeeded. Remember, a few years ago, Putin was having to fight a war inside Russia against the Chechens. Well, he managed to get them back on his side, and they're now the main fighting force in Ukraine for the Russians. So the people in Washington, that's how they're thinking. We're going to cause more breakup of Russia. We're going to discredit Putin in some way, and then we'll break up the Russian Federation, and there'll be a bunch of little countries, and we'll buy the leadership like we buy the leaders all over Europe and South America, and they'll all report to us. So this is what they're thinking in Washington. I'm not saying they'll succeed. I hope Putin is not that dumb. I wouldn't think he would be. But it's a serious problem for him. And of course, we have the same sort of attitude toward China. The rise of China is a threat to our power. So we're trying to cause trouble between Taiwan and China. There's a Chinese province that borders on what was Soviet Central Asia, Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, and it's Muslim. And so we're in there always stirring up trouble uh, between that province and the main government in China. So those are the kinds of ways Washington is going about this. That's Washington's thought. And I think it's a mistake for the Russians and Chinese to put up with it, because I think it makes them look weak to Washington. And so Washington intensifies. And at some point, it becomes so intense that the Russians and Chinese have to surrender or they're going to strike you. And there won't be any other alternatives. So that's where you get nuclear war out of this. And of course, the Russian nuclear forces are so far advanced compared to ours, are so far superior that there's no possibility of the United States surviving. I don't know if everybody's aware of this. The Russians have these hypersonic missiles that travel at many, many, many times the speed of sound. They're not supersonic, they're hypersonic. And they're stationed in submarines just off our coast. I mean, if they launch one, Washington is gone in 30 seconds. There's no warning. And the firepower of these things are immense. I saw a report that said that one Russian missile, I think the Sarmat, it has multiple warheads, so it's more than one, but one is enough to wipe Great Britain off the face of the earth. Just one.
Yeah.
So, and 4 or 5 does the U.S. Well, they got huge numbers of these. They can't be intercepted. They travel so fast, and not only that, they have randomly changing trajectories, so you can't target it in any way. You wouldn't be able to target it anyhow because of the speed. We don't have anything fast enough. But it doesn't just do on a trajectory. It's doing like this the whole time. And why do you want to? I mean, you have to be crazy to court a war with that type of weaponry in the opponent's hands. I don't know why they do it, except that I think they don't think Russia will do anything. And Putin has taken so many insults and so many provocations, and nothing has happened. And he still pretends he has a limited military operation in Donbass. Well, hell, he has to know he's at war with NATO. He has to know that. So why is he pretending he's not? So this encourages the neoconservatives in Washington to think that he's not going to do anything. We'll just push harder, and sooner or later he'll collapse. And I think that's how they're thinking. I used to be in Washington. I was in the think tanks. I knew all these people. They're not the kind of people you would want to be associated with. They really aren't. And it's just gotten that there's hardly anybody today in Washington that you do want to be associated with. It's not like it used to be. And when I went there was still some reasonable, good people and people who weren't entirely purchased. A little part of them was bought, but not the whole person. And it's the reason I left. I just kept watching the deterioration in the character of the people. And I said, well, I can't survive here unless the same thing happens to me. I left. Well, the ones that stayed, they had to adjust to what's required to be there.
Mm.
And so it's not a place you can expect to find uh, operatives. There may be a lot of intelligence there, but it can't operate in an intelligent way because it's owned by other interests pursuing their agendas. And if you get in the way of that, you're eliminated. So you
Mm.
can't say, hey, I represent the American people. That's what Trump said. Look what's happened to him. I mean, what else do you need to know than to see what happened to Donald Trump? Well, this is why nobody else does that.
Mm.
You see, if they can do this to a rich man, a tough man who's also the president in office, well, what chance has a representative got or a
Mm.
senator
Mm.
or somebody in a think tank? None.
No,
None.
that,
None. If some guy in a think tank starts talking like me and you, he's lost his job. If a news reporter starts reporting news they don't want reported, he's lost his job. Look, they're trying to shut up Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. They're trying to, and smart. God, he's smart. Tough. Yeah, he's tough. And they're trying to shut him up. We've got Brazil on him. We've got the European Union on him. We're after him. I mean, so what chance does a Republican representative have, or a Democrat representative, or senator, or a professor in a think tank? There's no chance to say anything, do anything. You can see that. Let's once again look what happened to Trump.
in closing, Mr. Roberts, because I value your time and I know you have a lot of things to do. I want to ask you. Well, first I want to say this. I was talking with Scott Ritter one day, and he was telling me about the hypersonic weapons that China and Russia has, and he was telling me about the air defense systems that Russia has, and he says that there is absolutely no way that the U.S. could even hope to win a nuclear war with Russia because, yes, some of the U.S. nuclear weapons may get through and it may damage Russia, but Russia would still be partly survived because of the air defense systems. So knowing that Russia has the edge militarily and has the edge and offensive strike capabilities and defensive capabilities, where's the sanity in the West in provoking Russia into a nuclear war or trying to initiate a first strike against Russia?
There is none. But you see, Rashid, think about it. Can you identify, can you find any sign of sanity anywhere in the West
No.
in the entirety of the 21st century? We're now in 24 years of the 21st century. What has anywhere in Europe, Canada, United States, what sanity have you seen in 24 years? I can't think of a single act of sanity in 24 years. Where is it? It's not there. What, was the war on terror sane? No. What terror act did we have? 9/11. Well, if these Muslim terrorists are so effective that they can overwhelm the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, all the intelligence services of Europe, the Pentagon, why did they stop the World Trade Center? Why? Why did they stop? They could have destroyed the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
We had one terror. It was an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
If you were Muslim terrorists and you have that kind of success, you got all the Muslim support in the world. I mean, they could have done all sorts of things, but didn't never happen again. So we had to have the FBI going around organizing groups and trying to get them to do terrorist things so they could be arrested, and then they could prove they were terrorists because it was an FBI organized group.
Mm-hmm.
So they were creating themselves terrorists to keep the myth alive. You may remember
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yes.
They got a lot of Muslims caught up in that, but it was FBI organized. Well, once again, what was saying about going into Afghanistan? What good did it do? They threw us out after 20 years. We destroyed Iraq. What good did that do? We destroyed Libya. What good did that do? It caused all kinds of turmoil and dissolution all in that area. We were going to destroy Syria, and the Russians got there first and said, no, you're not. That's the one thing Putin did. That was a strategic move he made that was good. Otherwise, Syria would have been gone. But why only one thing? I've never understood that. And I've never understood why Putin allows Israel and the U.S. to continue airstrikes on Syria.
Neither do I.
I don't, because allegedly Syria has the S-300 Russian air defense, which would knock down the American Israeli planes with ease. But apparently he doesn't let them use it. And why in the world doesn't Iran already have the Russian S-400? Then nobody could talk about attacking them. They wouldn't be able to get through the air defense. We don't have anything like that. And they don't have it. So again, you say, what's the matter with Putin? Why can't he think strategically? Why don't we have this agreement, this mutual defense? You see, the reason I'm for these things is it stops the move toward war.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a move toward war, it's not going to be conventional. It's going to be nuclear, and then everybody is going to die. It's not something we're going to be able to sit out and have somebody else do. Like World War I, World War II didn't have any effect on the United States, except make us richer because everybody else got destroyed. Well, in the nuclear age, that isn't what happens. Everybody gets destroyed, and I'm not in favor of that. And so that's why I would welcome some countervailing power to hem in this aggressive behavior of Washington. It's driven by the neoconservatives, and they're a tiny group of people. And why should they be making these decisions that affect everybody? I just don't see why that is justified. So I thank you for having me on your show, Rashid. I had heard about you, and I congratulate you on being able to see through all the bullshit and understand what's actually going on. There's so few people who actually can do that.
Yes, sir.
There is. And I notice it more and more of them are black guys. It's really quite astounding. I keep saying, do white people have any sense at all? No. But really, and I know Cynthia McKinney. I've known her for a long time. We're friends. But you see, she said she blew the whistle on 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
and the Jews and the military security complex right out of the house, right out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I said, if they can reach into a black district and remove a leader, she's a leader,
Mm-hmm.
like that, they've got all the power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm surprised you're tolerated.
Well, they've taken me off the air twice. YouTube has labeled me an extremist and said I promote violent terrorist agenda which I don't know what that is. I've never advocated violence. I've never advocated any but truth. That's what I advocate, truth, and that's what we're going to stand on, giving the truth and learning the truth and telling the truth, because so many lives hang in the balance, and we can't go on this narrative that they put out there that is endangering the humanity. So I'm going to do it till the wheels fall off. If not, my mom probably would slap me.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm going to do the same thing. It's our responsibility and our duty, and we have to do it. Maybe if enough people can see what's going on, maybe something could be done. But I described all the limits, all the problems of being able to do anything, because if you get a leader like we got Trump, they neutralized him with all these accusations. And now they've legalized, in the swing states, they legalized all the vote stealing mechanisms that they used. They're no longer illegal, so they can use them openly. They don't have to hide them because it's legal. The drop boxes are legal now. The Wisconsin Supreme Court overturned the ban on them. So they're legal. So anybody can get a bunch of fraudulent ballots and throw them in the drop box, and they go enter right into the count. And in Fulton County, Georgia, the Democrats have a lawsuit that they don't even have to authenticate the votes before they certify them. So they can do whatever they want. And I think that's what we'll witness happen. Maybe we should have another interview after the election, Rashid. Why don't you call me again and put me on your show again after the election?
You most definitely. I want you back on. I want you back on. I don't care if YouTube suspends me or whatever. I want you back on. I want to get your take on the elections, because I know there's going to be some shenanigans going on.
Yeah. Well, aren't there some other platforms you could get on, like Rumble or something?
Oh, I'm on Rumble. I joined Rumble not too long ago. And Odyssey and Rumble I'm on right now. Someone referred me to BitChute. I got to check it out. I haven't had time to, but my son usually does all of the technical things. I'm ignorant when it comes to the technical part. I'm not a child of the 80s or 90s or something like that. So I'm learning to get around the computer. But my 20-year-old, he'll come and hook it up for me.
I know what you mean. That's right. all this digital age, that's for the youth to understand.
Yes, sir. Mr. Roberts, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your answers, and I appreciate the conversation from the bottom of my heart. I really thank you, sir.
Well, I appreciate you, Rashid. And thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to talking to you after the election.
Yes, sir. And be blessed and be safe.
Oh, well, I'll try to be. So.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Okay. All right.
Bye-bye.
So long.
All right. Bye-bye. Everybody, this will be played back in a few days. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me on the most powerful platform for truth anywhere on God's green earth. I told you we're going to have many, many surprises for you guys. I'm working behind the scene. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. Hey, mama, look at your baby boy. I still love you more than life. Deuces, everybody. We're out of here. Peace.